Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel. Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel.
Welcome back. The last time we saw Underworld was with the series' worst, Awakening, which ruined and rewrote the series' lore and characters. Blood Wars is a continuation of that, and it's truly difficult to tell which is the inferior film. I'm tempted to say Blood Wars is the superior film, mainly by virtue of it not being Awakening. But it does also ignore some of the shittier aspects of that film. The film begins with narration from Celine the Ripper, who admittedly since the last time is a lot less psychotic, as she talks about how the vampires were bastards to her. She mentions Michael and his hybrid status, cause that'll be important, and there's also a change to the status quo here. Firstly, Celine says that Eve, the girl from the last film, was hers and Michael's child and not created in a lab, which is what actually happened. Okay, semantics perhaps. But, even more significantly, Celine doesn't mention the purge at all. You know, that little thing about how humans know about vampires and lichens and were systematically wiping them both out, but were actually run by lichens? Yeah. Not a single word. Like it didn't even happen. Things are looking up. The film begins proper with Celine on the run from both lichens and vampires. The lichens for obvious reasons, but the vampires as well because they're still pissy about the whole killing of all the remaining leaders thing. I guess being missing for 12 years and saving the entire race from a lichen plot to exterminate them all didn't lessen their resolve. Oh, sorry. Shh, we're not supposed to talk about that. Shh, didn't happen. Shh. Anyway, Celine gets cornered by lichens, since it looks like the vampires can't be arsed chasing right now, and they employ some kind of snare gun, but obviously Celine just shrugs the whole encounter off. Oh, David's there too. You remember David, the blandest character to ever grace a movie screen? Well, he's back to bore the shit out of us and to save Celine from some transformed lichens, even though nothing has managed to faze her yet. David explains that the lichens have a new leader, Marius, and like everyone else is searching for Eve. Celine makes it very clear she doesn't know where she is. A fact she'll be forever trying to tell everyone, but no one listens. But if they did, then this movie wouldn't exist. More's the pity. Also, Marius is basically Lucian 2.0, without his charm, pathos, or interesting character. And he and the lichens he leads are scrappy guerrilla fighters again, as opposed to literally running the world, so that's another detail you can forget about from Awakening. While David explains the continuity-defying plot, he's subsequently shot by a rogue lichen who Celine brutalizes while instructing him to tell Marius she doesn't know where Eve is. But at least she's messing up lichens instead of humans, and she's acting pragmatic instead of psychotic. After freeing the lichens, Celine and David leave to investigate and remove what he's been shot with. Neither suspect it's a very obvious tracking device, though, despite it being a very obvious tracking device. Meanwhile, Charles Dance's character Thomas is driven to a vampire stronghold for a meeting with someone called Samira, basically a self-important, thinks herself as the leader character. Thomas is first greeted by her right-hand man, Varga. Once again, it's clear the vampires are doing fine and can drive around in the open without being hunted and shot in the street. This is the final nail in the coffin, no pun intended, for Awakening. So everyone out there defending that shit to me, do you see now that even the filmmakers want to wipe it out from human memory? Do you see? So yeah, let's continue. Samira warns that vampire extinction is imminent and the lichens will destroy them, but Thomas basically just tells her she's talking bollocks. which is pretty rich coming from him, considering he was the let's run and hide and give the Lycans whatever they want guy in the last film. Quite the sudden shift in personality. But then Samira reveals her weird plan, cause despite everyone hunting her down, she wants Thomas to convince the council to let Selene return and train all vampire recruits to be as good as her. And after learning Selene is some kind of hybrid, she's especially anxious to get her back. Which doesn't slightly reveal her ulterior motive at all. But also, Dance mentions how in the last film, and yes, this is still canon, Selene used her blood to bring David back to life, which I don't really remember happening that way. I thought she just gave his heart a cheeky tickle, and that's what brought him back. But let's just chalk that one up to more retcon, eh? Samira also makes a point that Thomas was fond of the vampire elder Amelia, which is the film setting up something stupid later. But anyway, Thomas agrees to convince the council to allow Selene back, which assumes a hell of a lot about her, but whatever. Continuing with the film's breakneck speed introducing new characters and concepts, we're then introduced to Marius's Lycan army, who are just like Lucian's barely kept together rabble, even getting this little exchange where an argument occurs, causing one of them to start transforming.
Are you a slave? No, then don't behave like one.
Which is an incredibly forced way of making Marius look like Lucian, but it's the only true interaction he ever has with other Lycans. For the rest of the film, he treats them like glorified cannon fodder, so Lucian he is not. But he's still a damn sight better than corporate werewolf McFuckwit from the last film. Marius reminds the Lycans of their recent victories, despite how the vampires are in mansions while they're in a filthy train station. Yeah, they really look like the victors in this war. The guy Selene freed shows up and repeats her message. Obviously, Marius doesn't even consider it might be the truth. No, he's a great leader, of course. And the tracking device inside David is still working, so they can use that now. Obviously, Selene and David are a powerhouse of intelligence, making sure they're nice and cozy in a vampire hideout before even considering removing the obvious tracking device. While that goes on, Thomas tries persuading the council to allow Selene to return, which they're obviously... what was the word I used? Oh yes, pissy. They're incredibly pissy, not trusting Selene. Again, forgetting about the whole stopping the Lycan plan to exterminate them all thing. But they do eventually agree to let her come back. Back at the hideout, the inevitability of intruders occurs, but surprisingly, the Lycans haven't twigged where they are yet, as it's vampires sent by the council, and a letter from David's father explains they're both allowed back to the mansion. Selene, rightfully, is suspicious, but then, when the Lycans do show up, they force their hands to return. A lot of this is set up for something that won't last very long anyway, because the way these films go is Selene finds a safe haven, then something forces her to run again. The filmmakers just can't stand Selene being comfortable for a few seconds. It's all go, go, go at breakneck speed. Selene is greeted by Samira and given free rein to train all the recruits they have. But before that, the vamps need to get their Dracula on, with a lavish party, and Samira toasts the new additions. You know, usually, when someone is revealed to be the villain and up to no good, it's at least a little bit surprising. But I guess Underworld is bucking the trend on that one. Yeah, she doesn't even try to hide it when she asks David about Selene's resurrecting blood. And then this peculiar scene, where Samira and Varga talk about the plot, without saying anything of note, but the bizarre part comes when Samira gets eaten out mid-villainous monologue, shifting the Rise of the Lycans sex scene into the second place as the weirdest in the series. And elsewhere, Marius injects himself with an unknown substance, but trust me, it's gonna be stupid as hell when it's revealed later. Selene doesn't waste any time training the recruits. Her efforts will be for nothing though, they're just fucking with her at this point. But we get to see flashy holograms being shot. Selene seems completely familiar with this, despite never seeing this kind of technology at all.
My own invention.
Your own invention? No mate. The WWE were doing cage matches long before you had a go. What the fuck was that supposed to mean? It's literally just a cage round a ring. How does someone invent that? Celine and Varga end up inside the cage for a fight, which is as underwhelming as you might expect. There's a moment where they fight on the side of the cage, which is nonsensical. I'm pretty sure vampires haven't been able to do that kind of shit. Unless you count Erica. But eventually, Varga cuts the fight short by pulling a knife and slashing Celine's hand. That completely and instantly incapacitates her, as part of Samira's plan. The blade was coated in deadly nightshade, which should be fatal, but instead just paralyzes Celine. And can I just say how fucking convenient it is for a substance to suddenly be introduced into the series that has never been mentioned or used before that can take out Celine instantly. You know, it's that old problem of making your main character so insanely uber powerful that you have to pull shit out of your arse in order to create an adequate amount of tension, otherwise known as the Resident Evil method, minus the adequate amount of tension. Samira soon shows up to twirl her mustache at Celine, cause turns out she's just as pissy as the other council members, but more specifically pissy at Celine killing Victor. Yeah, we're getting balls deep into the lore of this film now. And then, in a really baffling move, Samira orders Varga to kill all the recruits in the room. It makes no sense as a strategy, since Samira is aware that the vampires are near extinction. And it makes no sense from a cover-up standpoint, because they won't object to her actions as a council member, since what she says goes. Also, I'm sure the pissy council won't care what happens to Celine. So the entire encounter is designed to make Samira look like the villain, but without any nuance or subtlety. The mansion is locked down with Celine framed for the killings, even though any moron can see she has no reason to kill the recruits. But I think we've established that the vampires aren't just any moron. David, with Thomas's help, uses these secret passages in the mansion to get around the lockdown.
That's convenient.
And surprisingly, they discover Celine has already been strapped into some kind of blood-draining device, which Samira just happens to have laying around for this expressed purpose. They get to work freeing Celine, and while they do that, the council, who are incredibly easily manipulated, believe Celine is a traitor, ordering Samira to hunt her down, but accidentally throw a spanner in the works by wanting her brought back alive. Thomas tells David to take Celine north to a place called Vardor, which is incredibly safe and protected. Well, at least until Celine gets there. But seriously, where were all these secret special places in the last film? Like I said, the vampires seem to be doing pretty well in their protected strongholds. Almost like the purge never happened. Anyway, we're about halfway through this film now, and Charles' dance is expensive. He's gotta go. Samira soon shows up and the fight between her and Dance begins while David continues freeing Celine. And yeah, just as I said, the obvious occurs. But hey, doing that just saved a considerable portion of the budget, so swings and roundabouts, yeah? Rather conveniently for our escapees, the sun is rising, so David jumps out the window, and surprise, surprise, he can now walk in sunlight.
They can walk in the sun.
Wait, she didn't know that? Then why was she so anxious to get Celine's blood, considering that's the most important feature of her becoming a hybrid? And how did David know that he wasn't just going to crumble into ashes and leave Celine lying on the ground unconscious? None of what just occurred makes much sense to me. For the time being, while the sun is up, even though it doesn't look like daytime at all, David and Celine can recuperate, with Celine being fed blood to heal. And because this series can't seem to get away from this stupid thing, she gets David's blood memories. Which I always thought in the first film, that was either because Victor was being revived or Michael was being turned into a lichen. But no. Apparently, ever since evolution, vampires can't feed on anyone without getting mind-shattering flashbacks. Back at the mansion, Samira is again tasked with finding Celine, employing Alexia, the one who found Celine before, to locate her and David again. But I just want to make it clear, Samira, who is double-crossing everybody, has convinced the council that Celine is the one double-crossing them. You got that? Good. 'Cause it's gonna get ridiculous. Oh, and a minor point here, but important one. We are shown vampires arc welding the mansion gate back in place. Yeah, slight problem with that. Arc welders give off ultraviolet light. Everyone in close proximity should be sizzling like sausages right now. Back with Samira, she now has Celine's blood, so she can go into daylight now, yes? Well, not really. Because of the nightshade from the attack, using Celine's blood needs to wait until the plot-contrived moment for Samira to drink it. Which, without overstating it, is fucking convenient to say the least. Alexia, meanwhile, has wasted no time in tracking Celine. I guess daytime lasts only a few minutes in this universe. But regardless, Alexia has the idea to inspect the train station footage. So, obviously in a world that knows about and actively fights against vampires, she's able to just wander into the control room, kill the two workers, and get the information she needs. Seriously, I should be pleased that this film is so casually eliminating the shite of Awakening, but it's just so weird seeing a film series retcon itself like a bull in a china shop. There's just no care or attention given to fixing things. They're just slashing pages and burning books. It's insane. Alexia informs Samira that Celine and David are going north, and of course, despite us never hearing about it before, Samira immediately knows where they're heading to. And apparently, Vardor is home to peaceful and non-violent vampires, which naturally means they're going to be unbelievably powerful, and the reasons our heroes win the day. Alexia continues to pursue Celine, however, she seems to be making an unexpected detour to the Lycan hideout. Naturally, she's doing some reconnaissance on Marius. Well, that has a name, but it's not reconnaissance. So let me get this straight. Samira is double-crossing everyone by making them think that Celine is double-crossing them. And at the same time, Alexia is double-crossing the double-crosser by being in contact with the Lycans. How are there any vampires left with them constantly fucking each other over? Celine and David are still making their way to Vardor by train. Oh, never mind, they suddenly and without explanation switch to horseback. Oh, that's fucking nice on the horses. They weren't galloping, so they weren't needed for speed, and then they just leave the poor things to freeze to death in the middle of nowhere. Could have just not bothered. Anyway, they then need to climb up a sheer icy cliff, which naturally, for two people who require horses to travel a short distance, they climb it in just 3 leaps. Fuck me, those poor useless horses. Eventually, they reach the castle of Vardor, which at first seems completely empty, until they're greeted by one of the white-haired vampires who lives there, who can also seemingly teleport. Which I can't help but think, and I might be the only one here, granted, but long white hair, vampiric nature, and the seeming ability to go all wispy and teleport, isn't that the Wraith from Stargate Atlantis? I mean, the Underworld version certainly doesn't look like a shark got freaky with a pufferfish, but I can't be the only one to think that there's one hell of a similarity here. Anyway, Lady Wraith welcomes David and Celine and takes them to speak to the leader of these vampires, who is currently having an icy bath. Although he's skeptical about their peaceful intentions, he's soon chummy and explains that they will be safe from Lycans because
our climate is quite an obstacle to warm-bloods.
As opposed to what? 'Cause I'm pretty sure a warm-blooded creature would do far better than a cold-blooded one in the freezing cold. Seriously, it feels like that was written to make the guy sound profound and all-knowing, but they didn't think it through, so it just comes off as stupid as all hell. Regardless of that, the film is about to plot dump on us hard, with a fresh revelation. Does anyone actually remember Amelia? You know, the elder vampire in the first film who got killed and we didn't give a fuck about, who was also in the second film who did fuck all, and we gave even less of a shit about? Well, turns out she's David's mother. And we still don't give a fuck about her. She barely had a personality, or even a character. She was just a plot point. So, trying to make her relevant now just tries to connect this film to the previous installments in an incredibly flimsy way. And quite frankly, apart from Awakening, This film isn't worthy to lick those films' boots, metaphorically speaking. Because Amelia was such a big shot, she left a few items for her son to have. First, a sword, because when your enemy have mastered guns with special vampire killing ammunition, a sword is the perfect match.
Your father's greatest work, infused with silver.
Oh, infused with silver, you say? Considering silver is a very soft metal and would considerably weaken the structure of the blade, let's make that a pretty shitty sword. David's not interested in following in Amelia's footsteps, since just like the audience, he doesn't know who she is. But there's also a convenient bauble which will resolve all that pesky conflict quickly, so never mind. Which Celine quickly hands to David. It's a sphere containing a ring, Amelia's ring, which actually is more than that, because the ring contains Amelia's blood, along with her memories. I have to wonder how the blood in the ring has remained perfectly fine after potentially who knows how many decades. I mean, by its very nature, blood congeals and coagulates. So unless the ring hermetically sealed the blood in a vacuum, I don't see how that is in any way possible. While David has his crisis, Celine wanders into an underground ice pool and finds something curious. Wraith Lady is wrapping and stringing up vampires for a type of hibernation, where they can see the very generic sounding Sacred World. There is a name, but they never describe what it is, only that water is the path. Is it the vampire afterlife? Another dimension? Plane of existence? Who knows? Like I said, generic, and ultimately just plot contrivance. Because when vampires enter the Sacred World, they gain the powers that Wraith Lady was showing off. So, in a series famously lacking in supernatural bollocks and maintaining a more scientific approach to vampires and werewolves, they're now doing a complete 180 on that. Though I'm not really surprised at this point. Also, Wraith Lady's powers seem pretty inaccurate.
I can see you've loved a lichen. Killed a vampire elder.
Yeah, we know for a fact, because it was shown at the start, that Celine has killed 2 vampire elders, Victor and Marcus. So maybe the Sacred World ain't all that. Back with David, he's decided to drink Amelia's blood. You've heard of decomposition? If it's not dust, then that's what the blood should taste like. Blech. Anyway, David gets Amelia's memories, but it's mostly just reused footage from Evolution. But after seeing himself being given up as a baby, David sheds a few manly tears. David's moment is cut short, however, as lichens assault the castle. You know, that castle that was difficult to get to, especially for warm bloods, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean. The attack begins with the doors being closed, and obviously they're choosing to fight guns with swords, with David taking Amelia's sword, which I'm worried is just going to snap any moment. Still, better than seeing him do fucking rhythmic gymnastics again. As expected, a large amount of vampires are gunned down as the lichens assault the place. Wraith Lady is able to do her thing, though, taking a few of them out. Wow, if only she could attack during this incredibly long transformation. "11 seconds that change took. Or, to put it another way, she managed to kill 2 other lichens in half the time. So, if she hadn't have just been standing there, she could have torn the fucker in 2 and everyone would have been better off. Especially the fucking audience. Anyway, the fighting continues with David, although it's so goddamn dark, who knows what's going on. God help the poor retching stomachs of the people who saw this in 3D. Wraith Lady kills her wolf, and David soon arrives to help her, and in the courtyard, Celine is doing her thing when Marius shows up. Because he would go out of his way to personally appear. He's a great tactical leader after all. A tactical leader who favours the all eggs in one basket approach. It's a bit premature for the big boss battle, so Celine versus Marius obviously ends with her arse getting kicked. I'm skipping past the full action straight to the interrogation scene, where Marius still refuses to believe she doesn't know where Eve is. So Celine just chucks him off the cliff.
You gotta do a superhero landing. Wait for it! Woo! Superhero landing! Yeah, that's really hard on your knees.
Marius soon lands after her, beginning his transformation. That, again, Celine just passively watches. But it's clear at this point it's not a normal transformation, as he turns into this CGI Sasquatch motherfucker. Come on, that's worse than Scrappy Doo from the last film. But regardless of the terrible look, it's still an even fight. Despite being stabbed in the chest, he proves surprisingly resilient. Just a shame Celine hasn't got any silver grenades with her. Oh wait, that was in the alternative timeline. We've established that. The battle ends abruptly when Celine is pushed by Marius onto Alexia's waiting sword. Did Freud just rear his ugly head? But anyway, Celine isn't dead yet, obviously. However, they now have her blood and memories to finally find out she's telling the truth. Wow. Well, now we know why Marius is shacking up with her. Damn. And I'm assuming it's not a vampire thing, because that's something we've never seen before. So I guess Alexia is just the vampire equivalent of Gene Simmons. So, fucking finally, they realise Celine doesn't know where Eve is, taking an hour to get to the exact same point than if Marius had just believed her in the first place. Marius then guns down Celine, but she's the main character and basically invincible, so she'll be fine.
Water is the path.
Wait, water is the path? She just said that. I thought when Wraith Lady told her that, she meant the water specifically in the castle, not just any water anywhere. So apparently, you can reach a higher plane of existence just by falling asleep in the bath. Once the Lycans have left, Celine is given her own little cocoon, as she's given the special ritual thing and is now basically absent from the movie until the very end. Meanwhile, Samira is enjoying the lesser-known Harry Potter book, The Goblet of Blood. You know, I can kinda see where the film is coming from on this. Vampires are incredibly resilient to damage and live forever, so their blood doesn't coagulate. But isn't that one of the main functions of blood? But then they also have the rapid healing. But it's ridiculous because, according to this film, if a vampire loses its arm, that arm would then remain perfectly fine indefinitely. But I guess you could argue your way around it. Not for Amelia's blood in the ring, though. That shit would just be dust. It's still a liquid, after all. So anyway, Samira just straight up chugs the frickin' thing in one. Considering only a small amount gave David the ability, it seems a little overkill. And of course she spills it everywhere as well. But the blood takes effect. However, until the sun is up, there's no real way to tell. David is urged to stay at the castle, but he knows that Marius intends to destroy the mansion and leaves to help. I guess he doesn't expect Celine to wake up. But back in the mansion, Alexia, who was so determined to avenge the vampires killed by Celine, just straight up murders another guy, and then deactivates the security for Marius. Apart from wanting to ride Marius's bones, Alexia has shown zero reason to want to betray the vampires. Unless she really does have the mentality of a teenager doing things for her bad boy boyfriend. But there's not much else I can assume from the situation. But it really doesn't matter anymore, as Alexia goes to speak with Samira, keeping up the pretense of being on her side, telling her about the Lycan assault. But Samira is one step ahead, telling Alexia that she wanted her to lead Marius there, and then Alexia is killed off very quickly. And you know what? She doesn't appear or get mentioned ever again. That is how much of a plot device, not character, she really was. I would have thought there'd be like a scene of Marius finding her body and being sad, but no, he doesn't give a shit. And neither does the audience. Samira is now using the attack on the castle to get the council to act against Marius. When they're unwilling to listen, she holds them hostage. But that's when David shows up to pretty much put an end to any kind of plot by Samira before it even began. David warns them about the impending Lycan attack, and the bauble that contained Amelia's ring also conveniently had vials the council members could drink to prove David is the rightful ruler. And because Samira is really shit at keeping allies, Varga turns on her immediately. But we've established there's no vampire loyalty, so Samira is arrested just as the Lycans attack. At least Marius attacks this time during the day, showing a modicum of tactics. But after some time, the vampires are ready for the assault as the Lycans explode the door, And yeah, pretty much the final battle of an Underworld film boils down to two groups of people shooting at each other, taking an excruciatingly long time for anything resembling Underworld to happen. Wow, any attempt to make Marius like Lucian just went right out the fucking window. These films have no idea how to characterize the Lycans anymore. They're just the bad guys. Eventually, Marius reveals his secret weapon, and it's a big gun. That's it. Just a big gun. Which the film shows us in overemphasized slow motion, as it fires a sparkly sunlight bullet, killing many vampires. However, here's the issue I have with it. Why does it need the special UV rounds? We just saw it's used to blow holes in the building and let the sun in. So, using rounds that are basically just a liquid in a thin shell would kind of hamper its effectiveness somewhat. Plus, we never actually see the thing shoot a vampire, so why bother? I'm pretty sure regular ammunition would be both more useful and cheaper. Marius sees David stand in sunlight, so they start firing at each other, and it's really comical to see these guys just shoot each other in the face without flinching. They then scream at each other for a bit, and then guess who shows up? Yes, Celine is back with her brand new blonde highlight powers after some time away, like this is fucking Dragon Ball Z. And now, fucking finally, the Lycans bother to transform, just when vampires who are a decent match for them show up, with Wraith Lady and the others joining in. But the ultimate boss battles are established, as Celine gets Marius to follow her, and Samira has taken out her guards as the fighting begins in the corridor. First with Celine toying with Marius a bit to get him to follow her, and then Samira and David start sword fighting, eventually leading to Samira's main quarters. And again, I won't show the entire fight because it's pretty dull, but the quick and repetitive cuts of the action are obnoxious and unnecessary. I'm not sure why they chose to do that. Celine leads Marius to the training room and starts using all the guns on him, which of course he just shrugs off. However, when Celine shoots at close range, some of Marius's blood lands in her mouth, which then gives her Marius's memories. And this is the biggest bit of bullshit the film has to offer, because that shit that Marius was injecting, turns out it was Michael's blood, and he is now dead. So yeah, central character in the first two films, and then killed off-screen. How pathetic can you get? Made all the worse by the fact that finding him was the entire goal of the last film. But then again, it can't be that bad if it delegitimizes Awakening even more. Moving back to David and his boss fight, they continue to mess around with swords, and David looks pretty beaten up, until he throws a knife at the shutter control, leading to the window opening on Samira. And because she idiotically didn't test the blood experiment worked before her little power grab, she's distracted by the sunlight long enough for this. And it has to be said that the coup de grace style of winning battles is an ingrained part of the series at this point. You know that thing where the hero and villain have been fighting for a while, and then they both face each other off and the hero pulls out one big final move to kill the villain? Well, Blood Wars doesn't just have one of those, it has two. Celine has led Marius to the arena in the training room, and Marius drinks the last of Michael's blood for a power boost. And then, for some bizarre reason, Celine bites her own wrist to get memories of Michael. So, she's drinking her own blood in order to recall things she already remembers? There's no reason she would have forgotten. Anyway, Marius tears into the cage and the fight begins, with Celine just getting punched over and over. Until, you guessed it, a surprise coup de grace, as Celine tears the guy's spine out. And yeah, that was ridiculously easy. But whatever, the film's pretty much over. And the film ends with David carrying Marius's head to get the Lycans to leave, ending the battle. Then David, Celine and Wraith Lady are made the new elders. And finally, at literally a minute left, it's revealed that Celine knows where Eve is, as she's been following her. So, to sum up, the only really important information of Michael is dead, and Celine knows where Eve is, was in the last 10 minutes of the film. Everything else was pretty much pointless window dressing. Oh, and the recruits that Celine was suspected of slaughtering never resolved at all. That was Underworld Blood Wars. I still maintain that this film is better than Awakening. Not because of anything it did, but what it didn't do. I don't see how this film isn't a retcon. The way it completely erased any mention of the vampire Lycan purge and being set 12 years in the future. And it may not be worse than Awakening, however, it's not a good film either. And like a pubic hair in a bowl of soup, it's the little things that ruin the whole. From useless vampire characters unable to not fuck each other over, to Marius, who the film desperately wants to make Lucian 2.0, yet lacks the charisma, personality, or even the longevity to be that. And the plot is completely non-essential. Everything about this film screams let's do it for the money and not the franchise. It's just so bland and uninteresting, and that is the most important thing to take away from this. Also, they're making another one, even though Blood Wars pretty much cleared up all conflicts and tied them in a neat bow. So how and why make another? It's just whipping a dead horse. But, in conclusion, the Underworld series is still doing far better than the Resident Evil series. But that's a comparison no one wants to be in the middle of, trust me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.